Hello, good morning, and welcome to another live broadcast of A Coffee with Chris. As always, this content series is brought to you in association with our charity partner, 𝗖𝗵𝗿𝗶𝘀, a fantastic local charity that help local people affected by cancer. And I am absolutely buzzing to get my old friend on today, Matt Sykes, who is the founder of Salescadence. His training and coaching de-risks organizational sales strategy and provides your team with the ability to reduce deal time, increase conversion rates, and significantly lower cost of sales. He's also the host of his own podcast, the Salescadence podcast, and is the author of some whopping great books, Converted and Sales Glue. Matt, welcome to A Coffee with Chris.
Chris, I've got to stop writing my own intros. How are you, mate? Lovely to see you.
I'm good, thank you. I'm very good. I'm so excited for this conversation because your sales training has completely changed my career and therefore my life. And I was really excited to get you on to chat all things sales and the link between sales and social. We've had some really heated debates over the years, which I've absolutely loved.
Rightly so.
I wanted to start with a question, Matt, which is around the classic challenge that business owners have, and I'm sure your clients, prospective clients, have as well. Marketing and sales, they're often detached. How can social media effectively work with new business, with business development, with sales? How can social media really help impact your world?
It's a chewy question to start with, Chris. Great question. So first of all, we have to accept that sales and marketing are two completely different things. So marketing are brilliant at getting bees around a honeypot, and sales aren't, because most salespeople are very, very challenged when it comes to going. I mean, most salespeople hate prospecting, so prospecting is sort of one step closer to marketing. Marketing is really good at getting bees around a honeypot. What sales are really, really good at, or should be really, really good at, is finding out who is Queen Bee and having a conversation with Queen Bee. And so I think the most important thing as we sort of kick this conversation off is, Chris, if sales and marketing aren't joined at the hip in an organization, then they're sort of missing the point, really, because one serves the other, and in turn, the other serves the other one back. So marketing's job is to try and find relevant people to get in front of salespeople. Salespeople's job is to turn those conversations into cash and then feed back to marketing how that went. Because on some occasions, and we're both in business, and we both know we don't win every deal, but if we don't give feedback to marketing about why that deal didn't close, or what went wrong in the conversation that I had, or did this feel like somebody who I probably can't help, if we're not feeding that back to marketing, then all marketing is going to keep doing is sending more people like that and sort of perpetuating the misery, really. So they need to be joined at the hip, Chris. They need to be communicating to each other. They need to embrace each other's role and support each other's role. That's how I think I would respond initially to that question.
I think that's gold already, Matt. And it always staggers me when I go into a business and do consultancy, how there's often two completely different strategies. Like one's in South Africa and one's in the Antarctic Circle. And it fascinates me. And what fascinates me more is that they literally barely talk to each other. And it really does blow my mind. And certainly from a social media and marketing world, which is obviously, where I've made my bread, is I actually also think you've said there, sales should actually feed back to marketing. Well, I also think that social/marketing should be feeding back to sales. And actually it should be going both ways, right? It's not a one-way street here. Would you agree with that?
100%. And so I encourage my clients. I used to do it myself when I spent a little bit of time back in corporate employment a year or so ago. I always encourage my clients to have marketing people on sales calls with salespeople, right? Because if a marketing's role is to try and create really great, valuable content, which is going to be engaging for an ideal customer to take interest in and want to know more about, and therefore lean in and have a conversation with the salesperson, it kind of only makes sense to me that marketing person actually gets in front of the person that they're attracting and listens to the way that the conversation goes. Because I can't learn much from myself, and I can't learn much from people that work in my organization, the marketing team. I can learn loads from the prospect or the customer. But I've got to be able to listen to them. And, you know, sometimes on calls, especially if you're new in the sales industry and you're learning your craft and you're finding your way, sometimes you're in that conscious world where, you know, you're going through your sort of framework of how you navigate through a sales conversation. And it's quite challenging then to try to listen to hear the answer. If you're a marketing person, you're shadowing on a call, you get to listen to what the salesperson says, of course, but more importantly, you get the feedback from the other person. And that's gold, because when you hear a prospect or a customer speak in a certain way or say certain words or give kind of signals, you just pull that information into your next marketing post or your next marketing strategy or whatever it is. And all you're really doing then is just intensifying the content that you're putting out for the next person.
So with you, that's brilliant, Matt. And I think linked to that, one of the things that I hugely believe in, which I always tell people, is that social media is all about speeding up the process between prospect and customer, or prospect and client, right? And we can do that by warming people up, not just posting fluffy, let's go viral social posts. And of course, there's a balance to be had between, you know, sales, or, you know, for those Gary Vee fans out there, you know, your right hooks and the jabs. What's the balance there? But for example, around the talking point, Matt, going back to that, I think a really important thing is for people in social to ask salespeople, what are the questions people are, what questions are they asking you, our prospects? How can we answer them further up the funnel to help you guys convert quicker? And actually, I think that's an incredibly powerful thing to do. So I think there's some really interesting points in that. And Matt, I'll be honest with you, mate. The main reason why I wanted to get you on, and you know how I approach this with you, I am at my absolute end of getting freezing cold, to use that analogy again, Antarctic Circle cold, LinkedIn private messages. And so there is a big problem and a big misconception and a complete misunderstanding of how to use private messages on LinkedIn effectively. I'd love to ask you how you think sales professionals, well, or anyone with an interest of winning new business, how can they use LinkedIn private messages effectively?
So I'm with you on the, I mean, a little part of me dies when I open up a direct message from somebody. But you kind of do, don't you? Because you think, oh, Christ, here we go. And so let's just go right back to basics, Chris, because this is really quite important. First thing I would say is let's agree one thing. I certainly do, and I'm sure you would as well. I know of at least one business that is prolific on LinkedIn, whose strategy is predicated on direct messaging. Not in isolation, because it doesn't work in isolation. It's a combination of a number of things that all come together, where the direct message essentially is moving things forward. But I know of one individual who's prolific on LinkedIn and easily does £1 million a year in his events business in the Formula One industry off the back of an outstanding direct message strategy. So let's have it right. It works. The problem is it doesn't work if you get it wrong. And so this is not something that you wing. This is something that you spend time and effort and energy in understanding how to crack the code, because if you can do that, it works. But if we pair it right back to its basics, what is a direct message? It's a conversation. Now, it's either a conversation starter or it's a conversation continuer. But in the case of direct messaging, it needs to be both. I can remember really, really briefly, just to set the scene, when I left corporate employment and started working for myself 10 years ago this summer, I can remember 3 months into self-employment. So the summer of 2014, I was new in the training industry, and my best friend set me up for a conversation down the local pub with a head of global technology for a really large telecoms company. And he said, Matt, go down the pub, meet me tonight. I'll introduce you to John. He'll love your stuff. It's a dead cert. And so I go down the pub that night, 3 hours later, sort of walking in there. Don't forget, I'm 16 years out of a corporate sales role. And after the small talk that's just taken place, my mate Stewie gets up, walks to the bar and leaves me in the company of this complete stranger called John. And John said the words to me, which I'll never forget, which is, so Matt, what do you do? Now, in 16 years of corporate selling, Chris, no one had ever asked me that question, right? And you don't know what you don't know, right? So the sooner someone asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, you default to the only thing that you know what to do next. And you know, for those people that are listening to this or might listen to it in the future, if you're in a corporate sales role, this will resonate with you. If I had a set of slides, I'd have got them out, because I told him how great I was, what my training was, how long the training lasted, what it cost. And after a sort of a 5-minute tirade of show up and throw up, he looked at me and he said, Matt, and he took a he finished his last pint and he put his pint glass down and said, Matt, I've no idea what you do, but I'm pretty sure I don't need it. And he got up and he left. And the point of the story, Chris, is direct messaging on LinkedIn is the same as me meeting John down the pub. If I meet John down the pub for the first time, I'm not going to walk up to John and say, hey, John, how you doing? Should we go and get a room? And the problem that happens on DM is you connect with somebody and then you think you've got the God-given right 30 seconds later to slap in a pitch on direct message. And that's where it all starts to go spectacularly wrong. And then that house of cards just completely falls down. And so the moral of the story, Chris, is there are a lot of really bad people on LinkedIn giving a lot of people like you and I a really bad name because they do it wrong. And sadly, that'll never change until people accept the fact that the reason why people aren't responding to you on your direct message is because you're crap. If you wake up to that silence, that's the applause you're getting. That silence is the no you would have got if you'd have qualified them correctly, and they don't do that. So sorry for the rant, back to you, but that's where it all comes from. But if you're willing to invest the time and get it right, a bit like the guy who runs the Formula One events business, you can have a lot of fun.
Absolute gold, mate. So many people are trying to get in bed on the first day, aren't they? Sorry to be crass at 10:30 when we're broadcasting this 10:30 on a Friday morning. But
just Chris, on that point, just to interrupt you on that point. But so key point number one, key takeaway for number one: stop being the imposter. You wouldn't go to the pub and say, "How are you? Why don't you just give me 10 minutes to tell you how flipping great I am?" You just wouldn't do that. So why would you change on LinkedIn?
100%. And a lot of marketing professionals debate about this all the time. And I'll tell you which side of the fence I'm on that. There's this whole hoodoo voodoo around, should you add a note with your connection request? I don't think you should, because it just instantly sends this signal of, I'm going to get you, I'm going to sell to you. And actually, if you have a coherent, organized private messaging sales strategy, which I know someone like yourself could support with, Matt, it's so much more organized, so much more authentic, and you're more likely to convert. And so I think that's a really important point. People make it all about them. That's so true. They just, show up and throw up, as you say. The other thing, Matt, which you helped me with early doors, and actually your F1 story is great. Also, your sales training was the reason why I made £100,000 worth of new business in year one in my first agency role.
Right.
And it was purely, and I mean purely, through LinkedIn private messages. And what I did is I listened to your advice around, I think you say giving, not, what was it? Giving, not, remind me, sorry, giving, not, is it giving, selling?
I mean, I think you already touched on it anyway. We go wrong because we try and get, and actually the whole point of this is to give. Right?
Yes, that's the phrase. Yeah.
So you kind of give to get. I think someone really much smarter than me wrote a book called The Give to Get Theory or something like that. People might correct me, but that's where we make the mistake, or people make the mistake, because they turn up on LinkedIn in direct messages and they put a message into your inbox, and their whole strategy is about getting something for them.
Yes.
And it's just, you just think to yourself, well, why would I do that? We don't even know each other.
So good.
And so,
and actually, that mindset, Matt, actually is completely applicable for social media pros watching and listening to this as well. It's about helping and not selling with your content. And actually, you could apply the same thing with your private messages as well. The other thing that we did speak about offline, Matt, which is a great, people love a tip. So many sales professionals speak to yourself. Obviously, loads of business owners speak to me as well with advice on this. And they come and they approach us and they say, yeah, we've tried private messaging, Chris. We don't get replies. Well, if you're just messaging like everyone else, well, well, then of course you're not going to get replies. And so the other game changer for me, Matt, was to use this thing called your voice rather than being an AI robot like everyone else, and sending a really lovely personalized voice note, making it about them, not about you, complimenting something that they put on their LinkedIn account recently, or sending a video message. Just selfie shoot it. Don't overthink it. Super authentic, it's human to human. I know that's a saying that gets banded about a lot, but would you agree with that, Matt, as well?
No, I would agree with that, Chris. And so one of my clients, large sales team working in the commercial lighting industry, one of the delegates reached out to me last week and said, I'm having trouble with DMs on LinkedIn. And so, cut a long story short, because I know we don't have time on here, but after we'd gone through the whole diagnosis reason why he wasn't having fun, aside from a couple of other things we helped him with, I said, and it came off the back of the conversation you and I had a few days earlier, actually. So you were the one that sowed the seed. I said, well, why don't you, rather than sending a text DM, why don't you use voicemail? And he basically said, I didn't know it existed. and you and I find that quite interesting because we've been around forever, been around for a long time and using it for a long time. But there are loads and loads of people out there, Chris, and it's sort of a key point for anyone listening who's not aware of this. On the mobile device, just like you have on WhatsApp, you have the ability to leave an audio message as a DM.
Yeah.
And so now you've got to be careful, though. You can't slap pitch a verbal pitch.
Of course.
You've got to, because you just defeat the object. You might as well just use words. But if you're willing to record a small, and it can be no more than 20 seconds. You get 60 seconds on this thing, but I think 60 seconds, the longer you go, and here's the psychological take on it, the more you talk, the more you sound needy. And so if you can be short and to the point and crisp in 20 seconds, and you're leaving it as an audio, two things happen. Number one, someone sees an audio message, triggers curiosity in the limbic part of the brain and goes, need to see what that is. And so they go and listen. And if you've done your job correctly and they spent time with people like you, and they've learned how to leave a creative, constructive conversation starter, you might get a response. And this is what happened to my client. He said, I got a response back. It was a really thanks for your message. Found that really interesting. Never had one of them before. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's not right for us, but let's keep talking. He wouldn't have got that response, I don't think, if he'd have sent a text DM. So, let's frame all of that and call it a pattern interrupt. So let's do something that swims against the tide, that is different to what my prospect is thinking is going to happen next. What are they thinking? Someone's just connected with me. Oh no, they've sent me a DM. I know what this is going to be. It's going to be a sales pitch. Well, let's do the opposite. Let's do it on audio and let's make it all about them. Let's give them as much value. So I think you mentioned it. Saw this, thought of you. End of. There's no ask. I'm starting a conversation. I'm down the pub. We've just met. How are you? What football team do you support? End of.
If it didn't ruin the audio at this point, Matt, I would give you a round of applause. I feel like pounding my chest after that. But it's true. Like, it's the same with organic social content, Matt. Like, that pattern interrupt is the phrase I like. And actually, with social, it's all about attention, engage, value with some of your copy as well. If you don't grab attention, if you don't stand out, if you don't put in a scroll stopper, how can you expect people to respond to you? And honestly, I would say, I'd say 98, 99% of my LinkedIn private messages get responses because I'm being different, I'm standing out, I'm making it about them. And actually, all I'm doing is I'm helping them. I'm just giving more. What cruel person would just not respond to free help? Like, it's very unlikely.
Let me jump on top of that brilliant point as well, which is to help even further. Number of things need to have taken place. Due diligence. Absolutely need to find something out about this person before I send them something of relevance about them. Because if I don't do the due diligence, I'm not going to know. Right. Yeah. So I need to go and do a bit of social engineering. I need to go and find something out about them that works. The second thing I need to do is I've got to find something of relevance, because, there's nothing worse than being told something that's irrelevant. Right. So I've got to go and find something within that social engineering, that due diligence, that's of relevance for me to allow myself the opportunity to reach out and give them something. But if I bring those component pieces together and I get super lucky, which is I'm timely. And what I mean by timely, Chris, is actually, I'm in the market for one of these, or I'm not in the market for one of these, but I might be soon. If you get lucky, because you've got no idea if they are, of course, because you're just reaching out for the first time. But if you get lucky and you bring those component pieces together, you're sort of starting to build this framework for success. Yeah.
So good. I'm very aware of time, Matt, and I don't really care going over because everything you're saying is so helpful. But I really wanted to ask you, my friend, what in your opinion, what are the 3 major mistakes that sales professionals are making when it comes to quote unquote selling on LinkedIn or sales or social, or what are the 3 big problems that salespeople are making?
Oh, that's a big question. No particular order, but I'm going to do the due diligence one again. I think that's a huge mistake. There's absolutely no excuse for you not to go and do some pre-work. Everything I need to know about the person I want to engage with, I can pretty much find out online. So I'm going to go and do that. I'll give you a perfect example. I'm going to just look at my phone here for a second. I just thought I'd screenshot a couple of pictures that I got through DMs. I've got one here from Trisha. Hi, Matt. Thanks for being my first degree network. So pretty much as soon as I connected, she sent me this. Just looking through your profile, and it looks like you're someone who should have written a book.
Oh, no.
And you think to yourself, well, I've written 2, and actually it's all over I've prostituted myself all over my profile. So you've lied to me by not looking at my profile, and you haven't worked out that I've written 2 books.
Just a quick pause, Matt. Just a quick pause, my friend, please. Right, this is why I wanted to do this episode, because it can actually, this isn't just about improving and growth. I'm actually wanting to have this conversation with you today for personal brand damage limitation. Because honestly, so many people are damaging their digital reputations by just these spammy, cold, private messages. It's awful, and it looks lazy, and it can be more damaging. So you're like, oh, brilliant, I've PM'd 50 people today. But actually, all you've done is you've ruined your reputation with 50 people that day if you've not done the due diligence. So I think it's a brilliant point to start off with, Matt.
Yeah, and I was going to say something genius then. I completely lost my train of thought. But so yeah, it was to do with sorry, off the back of that is, do you know how hard it is to create an opportunity in sales? It's really, really hard, and organizations will invest hundreds yet thousands of pounds to try and create the opportunities to have a sales conversation with somebody, and then somebody goes and acts in a behavior like that. That's just totally unacceptable. And so if you're in an organization that's investing in, people like yourself, Chris, or you're investing in some kind of internal marketing strategy, which involves cost and money and investment, just ask yourself the question, when that marketeer has worked their tail off to put a lead in front of you, what's happening to it? Because if the salesperson isn't acting in the appropriate way and they burn that lead, and worse than that, you don't find out about it, it's probably going to happen again. So sorry for a bit of a side rant. You asked me for 3. The first one was due diligence. The second one I would say is be yourself. So it's really, really easy, especially in a corporate role. And maybe we shouldn't be targeting the corporate space so much, but it's quite an easy target. And I mean that with genuine sympathy, because you work for an organization, you've got a large internal marketing machine pumping out loads and loads of marketing collateral. But of course, for all the obvious reasons, it's quite safe content and it's quite corporate. And the danger and the risk is, and I know you've mentioned this many times, Chris, is the danger is that the salesperson gets behind that content and doesn't really add any personality to it. They just sort of reshare something. And all they really need to do to add a little bit of sparkle, a bit of foo-foo dust, is just say, interesting post from us here at, 𝗖𝗵𝗿𝗶𝘀 Paints. I'm curious to know what you think about this. My take on it is the other. And again, you put me on the spot a little bit, so you have to be careful with what you write. But what you're then doing is you're not only promoting your organization's business and you're being respectful and giving it a little push, and you're not crossing that boundary into, I'm a maverick salesperson, I'll do my own thing. So you're supporting the internal strategy, but you're setting yourself aside from everybody else in your space who probably is just reposting that without anything. Because the name of the game is, and maybe this is number 2, is how do I get myself, and I'm going to quote the brilliant Daniel Priestley, how am I going to get myself to be a key person of influence? How do I own the space that I'm selling into? How do I act differently? Well, you act differently by interrupting the pattern of thought and showing yourself to be a bit of an authority in that market. And it's something that you've got to be careful with and take advice from marketing people and people like yourself, maybe people like myself. But if you can get that right, it's not too difficult to do it. And if you're not careful, you've got people contacting you rather than you reaching out to them. So maybe the second thing is strive to be a key person of influence.
So good. Let's have your third.
Third one. I think the third one really is just to go back to that last thing that we said, which is the give to get, or, you know, don't have a get mentality, have a give mentality, because that'll come back and feed you in return. So when you show up, have a mindset of giving stuff. Now, I don't subscribe in the give at all costs. I'm in sales. At the end of the day, I need to put money in the bank. And I'm, you know, if I work for an organization, I work for myself. If I work for an organization, they're paying me a salary to make deals happen. So I'm not just going to give for no reason. I'm going to give strategically, but I'm going to show up and have the benefit of the other person at heart first. But here's the thing, and here's the third point: consistency. So important. If I just I'm a once a week poster, I'm okay with that, but I'm an everyday comment and connector, right?
Brilliant.
And so show up and be persistent, because if you only show up once and go away, then you're gone. If you show up every week or every 2 days or whatever your desired duration is, you'll get people become familiar with you. And it's that consistency then that allows you to have those conversations, because when you do put a DM in there and you've been consistently showing up for 6 months, you're not really a cold stranger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And then the side point of that is, in order for that to happen, Chris, consistency can only happen if you've got content, right? And so you kind of need this ecosystem of content that you can start to push out, whether it's something like this, whether it's an advice from a book, it's a video that you've created, it's some comment from some organization, it's a link to something from the industry. But if you set up, and you're very good at this, if you set up a kind of a calendar of content, then that takes the pressure off. You become consistent, you don't become a stranger, and all that does is help the key person of influence thing happen. And I wouldn't say you're off to the races, but you give yourself a good chance.
Matt, I think I can feel an episode 2 with you coming within the next week. Just so good today. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Chris, I love spending time in your company. Thanks very much.
And thank you to everyone watching and listening. And genuinely, by the way, I don't say this for everyone. There's 2 people that changed my life and changed my career. Matt is one of them. Career changing, business booming. You should absolutely invest in his sales training. It'll be the best money you've ever spent in your organization. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this episode, give it a like if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. Let us know what you're thinking and feeling. Put some comments in there, and myself and Matt will be back to you. We shall see you next week for another episode of Coffee with Chris. Have a good day. Cheers.